Every powerful empire that collapsed and vanished throughout history claimed its currency was secure. Every state was certain its promises would last forever. But this was a complete lie, because history is ruthless. It painfully showed them they were wrong every single time. From magnificent Rome to Lebanon, from glittering silver coins to paper money, even to the crypto era, almost everything they valued. One morning they woke up to find it had lost its value. Their paper money and salaries were meaningless, and their future had been stolen. It is completely wrong to say that collapse is a rare occurrence. Collapse, like death, is an inescapable rule of life. But the real question here is how people can keep themselves safe and protect themselves from collapse when financial systems collapse. But how will this happen? Throughout history, people have stood in the illusion of permanence, constantly repeating the most dangerous financial mistake possible. They looked at their bank accounts or the money in their pockets and thought they were safe. But money is not something as solid as steel. Money is only a natural result of trust, and trust can disappear overnight. History has repeatedly presented this rule to mankind, like death, collapse, and crises. Let's look at the magnificent Byzantine Empire. Known as the eastern half of Rome, it stood for over 1,000 years. At the heart of its economy was the gold solidus. Merchants in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia accepted it without question, because it was a symbol of trust in the powerful Byzantium. But over time, Byzantium also diluted its gold, mixing worthless metals into the alloy of pure gold, and beginning to take actions that undermined trust. Perhaps it wasn't noticed at first, but when people eventually realized this, trust in gold cracked. This gold currency, which had sustained Mediterranean trade, became a political fiction. When the collapse began, who survived? When governments debase their currencies, real value flees to assets that cannot be counterfeited. It was not those who hoarded paper or promises who escaped the collapse, but those who hoarded pure gold or land. Everyone else's impure gold coins evaporated. But collapse does not always come from governments or states. Sometimes it can be caused by natural or unexpected shocks. Between 1347 and 1351, Europe was shaken by the Black Death in an unexpected way. Why was it so shocking? Because almost half of the population was wiped out. That is, for every 2 people alive, 1 was dying. Cities emptied, most villages disappeared, trade stopped. However, there were still survivors. They were able to demand higher wages for any job requiring human labor, and food and land fell into their hands. Those with liquidity became black marketeers and opportunists, while others were left behind, crushed under the collapsing system. The same thing happened during the COVID pandemic. Those with liquidity and money-accumulated assets, houses, land, property, while the majority, millions living on salaries provided by others, felt the weight of the collapse to their very bones. Why did the magnificent banking system collapse in 1340s Florence? The Berti and Peruzzi families, the wealthiest families of the time, had lent money to the Kingdom of England. They hoped to earn more through interest. However, this plan backfired. When the King of England stopped repayments, the banks collapsed because, over time, trust evaporated and liquidity dried up. Depositors went bankrupt, trade stopped. The people of that time learned the hard way, in misery, that size did not mean security, as the system collapsed in an instant. Despite all this, who always survived? These collapse scenes are woven with many such historical examples. During the American Civil War, the North printed greenbacks and the South printed graybacks. This mutual war between them shook confidence. Where there is a lack of confidence, inflation inevitably rises, and savings melt away. In France in the 1790s, assignats were printed, and over time so many were printed that the currency rapidly lost its value. Similarly, in 1997, the Thai baht collapsed, and people entered an economic crisis because there was no longer an environment of trust in the region. More recently, Lebanon was forced to close its banks in 2019 to 2021, and the value of its currency plummeted by 90% overnight. Those who survived, and even turned crises into opportunities to become stronger, were those who possessed real assets. Gold, silver, precious metal owners, land, food, and skills remained intact. Not paper, not words. Is every crisis a transfer? History shows us that everything collapses, but true value remains standing. It is those who remain standing, rather than the trusting majority, who make the transfer to the prepared minority. The real question is, as someone who understands or learns this, will you trust the paper that countries produce as a false security unit, or will you possess real value? This needs to be examined. So why do banks, which are another illusion, and a philosophy accepted by everyone as too big to fail, fall? And how can this be detected in advance? In the 1340s, Florence was the financial capital of Europe. The city was controlled by powerful banking families such as the Bardi and Peruzzi, who lent money to the English crown, as we mentioned earlier. However, it was not only the strategic mistakes made by these families, but also the fact that people trusted these large banks based on their size and thought they were too big to fail. But one day, everything turned upside down. Loan repayments suddenly stopped. When the banks ran out of liquidity, they collapsed. Trade routes were blocked. And ordinary citizens saw their savings deposited in these banks disappear overnight, reduced to worthless pieces of paper. People saw their life savings disappear. At that moment, history's cruel rule was understood once again. Too big to fail did not mean safe, and they paid a heavy price for it. Powerful paper currencies and size cannot protect people in times of crisis. Only real value and preparedness can. This historical lesson was relived in 2008 with the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Once one of the most prestigious and secure banks in the US, it created market uncertainty and panic in just a couple of days, shaking depositors and investors. Similarly, as seen in recent history, when banks closed in Lebanon in 2019, ordinary salaried workers could not access the money they had saved, perhaps planning for a comfortable retirement, the fruits of their lifelong labor. No one who did not prepare for these massive or large-scale events, regardless of the size of these institutional entities, and who did not have real assets, was protected, nor will they be protected. So, is it possible to avoid these collapses? Can anyone escape such devastating collapses? Pandemics taught us the same lesson. During the COVID pandemic, those with cash or liquidity accumulated assets of real value or converted to them. They seized opportunities in the stock markets and real estate. They turned to perhaps the world's most valuable, unchanging assets: gold, silver, land. However, millions of ordinary people living on salaries and in debt were left behind. Collapses always reward those who are prepared and have reserves, while the unprepared millions are crushed under the collapse of the reality they mistook for certainty, caught in the relentless and merciless wheels of history repeating itself. And these examples clearly tell us that the promises of the system created by countries and empires are never guaranteed. Trust can disappear one day, suddenly and destructively. Those who truly wanted to survive were the ones who owned tangible and immutable assets, not the promises of institutions. Gold, land, food, production skills. Paper and words are just an illusion. These were the real protections that kept them standing in times of crisis. Paper money, bank accounts, cryptocurrencies, or government promises are never permanent. No matter how much the systems boast, or how big they are thought to be, they can disappear overnight. This risk is even greater in our current era of artificial intelligence, but real value lies in things you can touch, use physically when needed, and exchange for other things. Gold, silver, land, skills, food, or relationships with the community. These are the real elements that ensure survival in crises. Throughout history, since the dawn of humanity, These types of processes have befallen every rising, growing, and collapsing empire and country, and they will continue to do so. Here we must ask the critical question: can our money also die or become worthless? Could this happen to the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, the European euro, the British pound, and the artificial intelligence era cryptocurrencies? Or what pieces of paper have we tied our trust or sense of security to? History constantly asks this question and constantly repeats the answer. Money is not a permanent value. It is only a word, a trust, a guarantee. And when that environment of trust disappears, or when promises are not kept, money evaporates, disappears in an instant. A more recent example, Silicon Valley Bank, synonymous with the word trust, was a bank whose value was based on trust until 2023. It wasn't one of the world's largest banks, but it symbolized trust. It collapsed in just 48 hours, not because it was small, but because trust was shaken. Depositors panicked completely as a result of the shaken trust, withdrew their money, and the system immediately shut down. This simple example showed once again that it is not enough to say, "My deposits, my wealth. My money are safe in the most trustworthy US bank." When trust is shaken, no bank protects anyone but itself, especially not the people who believe in it. It cannot protect me or you. And in times like these, it is the millions who believed in this system or its false promises, caught unprepared, who suffer the most betrayal and loss. Let's quickly dive into the topic with an example from history, going back to Germany in 1923. The hyperinflation period. The value of money was eroding by the second. In those years, people were forced to use the money they had saved throughout their lives, their savings, to fuel their fireplaces, to survive, to escape the ruthless clutches of collapse. Because the cash held by the government of that day was worth less than firewood. As strange as it may sound, it seems unbelievable, doesn't it? But it wasn't just pieces of paper that were burning. What was burning was the symbol of insecurity that the government had failed to create, the very trust people had in banks and the government's promises. When that trust vanished, the power of money evaporated, becoming less valuable than firewood. The picture is no different in Argentina. Inflation is rising, prices are increasing every month. People worry about next week's grocery bill. Money can lose its value at any moment. But what survives are always the things of real value: gold, silver, land, food, and skills. These remain standing in times of crisis. Even if money loses its value, tangible and usable assets protect you. Collapse doesn't always start with a dramatic explosion. Most of the time it comes quietly, unnoticed. But one day it suddenly catches up with you, and then you ask yourself, are you prepared? Or are you just trusting paper and words? We've talked so much about crises and collapses, but how does the money created by trust become worthless overnight? What mechanisms are set in motion, and how do crises redistribute wealth? It's time to talk about the strategies that the survivors used to win and the reasons why millions of ordinary people lost. History shows us this. Everything starts with trust. Money is not a physical value. Banknotes, digital balances, or metallic coins are merely symbols based on the word and trust of countries, states, and empires. People use a currency because they believe it is valuable, others accept it, and they take refuge in it. However, when trust is broken in environments with highly sensitive values, money can disappear overnight. History has shown that it is full of examples of this. Accordingly, how does the mechanism work? Loss of trust. It starts the process. Over time, when people lose confidence that the currency will retain its value, they quickly move away from it or withdraw from the currency or cryptocurrency. Liquidity crisis. As these events accelerate and this movement moves beyond the individual to become social or collective, banks or financial institutions suddenly become unable to meet their obligations. Money circulation stops and transactions cannot be made. People lose their trust in these types of institutions. Prices change rapidly. As a result of not being able to access liquidity, in addition to the difficulty of accessing cash, the value of money falls relative to other assets, and the prices of physical goods and services rise rapidly. Wealth transfer. During a crisis, those with liquidity or tangible assets move away from depreciating money and accumulate goods, property, and resources that may be more valuable. The unprepared, who are generally millions of salaried workers, lose out. Examples from history confirm this. Rome and Byzantium. When the value of the silver denarius and gold solidus was manipulated with worthless metals, public confidence was shaken and the currency lost its value and became worthless. But those who possessed tangible assets such as real gold and land protected their wealth. In fact, their purchasing power increased because the value of their assets rose while the cost of goods and services did not increase at the same rate, and in some cases even fell. Florentine banks. In the 1340s, loans given to King Edward III of England were not repaid, perhaps because one of the things the royal family wanted was to increase its own power and the value of its currency. Even if it meant collapsing the Italian banking system, which was not its own, this is also a possibility. However, the truth was that depositors lost, but merchants who managed to hold on to their goods gained. Black Death. When half the population perished, life proved even more ruthless than history itself. Those who survived increased the value of the price paid for labor and human effort, gaining economic strength. Modern examples. In 2008, homes in the U.S. changed hands through foreclosure. In 2020, during the pandemic, those with cash increased their assets. In 2023, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank demonstrated the rapid loss of trust. How do survivors win? First, those who hold tangible assets, gold, silver, real estate, food, and liquid assets, by not falling for the fakeness of abstract assets or so-called safe havens. Second, those with skills and productive power. Those with skills that are useful in a crisis create value and win under any circumstances. So why do millions of ordinary people with regular jobs lose out? Because they trust a single currency or bank. Second, they are in debt, have made this a permanent part of their standard of living, and depend on fragile systems. Third, when the crisis hits, they lack the ability to act and have no access to tangible assets. The picture is now very clear. Throughout history, every empire, government, state, administration, and the monetary systems they created have collapsed. From Rome to Lebanon, from Florence to Argentina, money died, trust was lost, paper promises became worthless and meaningless. People woke up one morning to find that the gains, dreams, and savings they had accumulated throughout their lives had vanished. Banks closed, coins became worthless, economic systems collapsed. Cryptocurrencies were reduced to zero or disappeared, but there was always one thing that survived. Tangible, and controllable values always retained their existence. Physical assets like gold and silver, land, production capacity, food stocks, skills, and reliable relationships. These not only ensured survival during the crisis, but also enabled people to emerge stronger. Because temporary things like paper promises, numbers in a bank account, or government pledges are doomed to disappear when trust is lost. It is not only what you have, but also what you can do or what you are capable of doing that is the key to survival. People who solve problems and create value during a crisis survive if they can stand out with what they can do, even if they realize they don't have what others have. A baker, carpenter, repairman, producer, or someone who can communicate well becomes an indispensable part of the market in times of crisis. Even if paper money or crypto systems disappear, skills cannot be taken away by any power and are always useful. In light of the historical examples that are constantly repeated and given, what can a person do today? Build real value, Don't put your trust in paper money or a single bank or system. The things that will protect you in a crisis are physical and tangible assets. Develop useful skills, skills that will ensure your survival, create value for others, and solve problems. Crises test not only money, but also production and skills. Stay away from debt and fragile systems. Consumer debt leaves you vulnerable. If you are dependent on banks, a single system, or government programs, you will suffer the most in a collapse. To avoid being alone when a crisis hits, reduce or completely eliminate your debt burden, and limit or completely eliminate your dependence on fragile systems. Be prepared, don't be passive. Even small steps make a difference. Thinking differently, acting differently, and taking small precautions today is the key to protecting your life or standard of living during the coming crisis. Even steps that seem simple can make a big difference. Don't just watch, learn, apply, invest in your future. And now, the most uncomfortable but necessary question for you is, do you only have government-issued paper money, currency, and crypto assets that emerged in the era of artificial intelligence? Or do you have assets or skills with real value that will protect you during a crisis and make you even stronger? Should people plan and build these things? The important thing is to prepare and be ready, even if the crisis isn't at the door. If you liked it or found it helpful, you can subscribe, like, or share. The choice is yours. See you in the next video. Bye.